Hello guys, and welcome to our first video in the series Chess Coach Teaches Through Ernie Chernev's book, Logical Chess Move by Move. This is a fantastic book. It is really well written, and if you get a copy of this, you're going to learn a lot from each of these games. And I'm going to start by going through the very first one in today's video, Von Schieve versus Teichmann. And we're going to learn a little bit about pins and a few more topics. So without further ado, let's jump right in. This game is played back in 1907, and we see maybe a bit of out-of-date opening. We see e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, all very normal. But here, after c3, black plays queen to e7. This is not really as common anymore. It's been shown to be a little dubious. Bringing the queen out early in this particular case isn't that bad. It's just there are better options. The most common move here is for black to play knight to f6, which seemingly allows white to get this beautiful center. Notice it's defended once, twice, thrice. And it's only attacked 3 times, so if we go first, we will eventually lose. We can make one set of trades, but one more will lose us material. This seems like it's giving white exactly what he wants, but the theory goes bishop to b4 check. Now, knight c3 is very interesting. It's very interesting. It's pawn sacrifice. It's very dangerous. But the main move is bishop d2. And after bishop takes d2, we see knight takes d2. And now a very important move from black, pawn to d5, forcing white to take, the knight to take back. And now white's got an isolated pawn. This is no trouble at all for black. This is the main line. But now, back in 1907, the move queen to e7 was played a little bit more often. The idea is quite simple. It prevents our opponent from playing pawn to d4. Here, Mr. Von Schieve castled. Instead, if he had tried d4, I'll give you guys a second pause if you can find the tactic here. Very important idea. It's the reason why the queen goes to e7. It's because after pawn takes on d4, pawn takes on d4, queen takes e4, picks up a pawn, and maybe even a second one. So that's why Mr. Von Schieve castles. And now black plays pawn to d6. Now white can indeed play pawn to d4. And I want to just pause for a moment and get your opinion on this position. What do you think black should do here? Should black capture on d4? Or should he simply move his bishop back? So you should know that the rule is if a capture is not forced or fantastic, it is probably foolish. And this is no different. The correct move here and what was played was bishop to b6. You might be wanting to take, but that's going to lose us our central pawn for the pawn on c3. Notice the difference. Look at this. What's gone? Our central pawn and his wing pawn. So there's no reason to do this. It only gives white better center, or really just hurts our center. And we're still going to have to move our bishop. It's not like we want to go over to b4 and get kicked out by another set of pawns. So the best move here is, in fact, bishop to b6. And we're not so afraid of moves like pawn to d5. This is very scary. And the first lesson I want you to learn from this video is that space is not always a good thing. This is a lesson I've learned many times playing against some of Alabama's. This is where I'm from, state of Alabama in the United States. Some of our best chess players are very positional, and so they're perfectly fine by giving up some of their some of their space in exchange for targets. When the pawns come forward, they either create targets, or actually in this case, they just simply create bad pieces. White's bishop is now blocked. So our knight does have to go back to b8, but then it will reroute and could even blossom later in life as an even better piece than it currently is, or when it was back on c6. So we're not too afraid of this, and I'll show you another example of this later. So white correctly decides to just keep the tension in the position, doesn't take on e5, that would not be forced or fantastic, and doesn't push, but instead plays a4. Okay, quick test. What's the threat? What's the threat? Okay, the answer is actually a5. Now, this is a surprising tactic. You might say, well, I can just play knight to f6 here, and I'm doing great. Uh-oh, look at that bar. a5, Knight takes a5, rook takes a5, sacrificing the rook. Bishop takes a5, queen to a4, and you lose a bishop. Of course, if you try to go the other way, then we can simply play pawn to d5 here, and you're going to lose one of your two pieces. So that is why black plays the move a6. Now again, you probably are wanting to play a5, not give up the space advantage. But here, black plays a6, allowing white to play a5 and backs up the bishop, because he knows that this pawn on a5 is going to be a target. So just in general, don't be so afraid of your opponent gaining space. They could be targets, but they could be blocking their piece activity. So here, it's white's turn. You feel like white has all the momentum, and he does have a good position. Again, this is not really the best opening from black, but he's given white a little bit of aggressive sense. White feels like he can push, and he makes a bit of a mistake. He plays h3, which this move is technically fine, but it's going down the wrong path. And after the move knight f6, we see pawn takes d4. And this is, again, not a forced or fantastic exchange. This gives up the center. It allows us to maybe make an exchange if we are down in space, like this cramping pawn is doing to us, like these two strong central pawns are doing to us. You want to trade pieces, so this is allowing us to trade minor pieces, the trade pair of knights. What else does it do for us? It opens up this bishop and allows us to potentially get at the king at some point. So pawn takes on e5, no good. Knight takes e5, and here white plays knight takes e5. Again, not the best move. There's no reason to make this trade. Probably better would have been just to play knight bd2 to prepare to replace the knight on f3 with another knight. Here, white took, and of course, we're going to take back with our queen. Beautifully centralized queen location. You cannot play f4 because then the king would be captured. That would be illegal. Okay, if you do that, you get banned from my video. So knight takes e5, queen takes e5, and now white plays knight d2. And this is arguably the game-losing mistake. In this position, black has a beautiful game-winning tactic. Can you spot it? Here we have the theme of the video, pins. This is the first and most important pin of the day. Here, black has an amazing sacrificial move. The correct move here is bishop captures h3. A wonderful pawn-grabbing move. And that's all it should be. White really can't take back, because if he does, he'll lose the game. And the game would continue with black having a solid advantage up a pawn. But here, white does take that bishop and says, what do you think you're doing sacrificing that bishop? I only see that you're winning one pawn. You're opening up the G file. Hey, anytime the G file is open, I can move my king over here, then bring my rook and start attacking you. Why is this so bad for me? If you haven't caught on already, hopefully you do see the second move now. The game-winning queen g3. And the pin rears its ugly head for white. The pawn cannot move. It is frozen. It is like its heart has been pierced by an ice pick. It cannot move, and it is dead. The pawn is irrelevant now. The king moves over to h1, and of course, black collects another pawn with check. And now, to win the game, what do? You need to bring more pieces into the attack. Knight g4, threaten mate in 1. There is only a couple options. I mean, you guess you could throw a few sacrifices in, but the only way to try and stop the checkmate without losing material is knight to f3. But the game ends rather quickly with another beautiful pin. Queen g3, the same one as before. And what's the point? Do we just want to go back and forth and make a draw? We're not going to go to h3. We're instead going to now capture on f2. But how do we capture? Do we take with check? We could, but that would allow white to get rid of our aggressive knight. And we don't want to do that. So instead, bishop takes on f2. And maybe technically this isn't the very best move. The computer all of a sudden is actually saying that the game could be made very messy with the move bishop takes f7. Very messy with this move. But we're not going to get there. We're not going to worry about that. That it is indeed winning for black, just through a minefield here. But the point is, if you are not going to try and play this perfect sacrificial attack from white, you are going to get checkmated. And in this position, actually, white just resigned in view of the threat, which is queen h3. For instance, if pawn to b4, queen h3, and the king cannot move over. So knight to h2 and queen to h2 is mate. This is a great example of how pins can completely change the outcome of a game. We saw here in this position a totally normal looking kingside structure from white, but there is a serious drawback for him. The pawn on f2 is pinned. Black knew that, and with the h-pawn having already pushed itself, black realized that g3 was open. In fact, the queen could go there right now, completely safe, but there's no check, there's no threat. So instead, he started with this beautiful sacrifice and was able to come in and finish off with a very nice finishing tactic here with bishop takes f2. All right, we'll go ahead and stop there for today. I hope you enjoyed this. We'll be back here with game 2 very soon. If you like this, please make sure to hit the like button, comment, tell me what you enjoyed and what you learned, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.